Welcome back to the Spectra Creative channel, where we talk about trends in the toy industry. I'm your host, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich. I've been a professional toy maker and marketer for over 20 years, and I'm also a collector. And today, the trend we're talking about is cannibalism. What in the world does cannibalism have to do with the toy industry? I mean, obviously, Hollywood has had its fair share of stabs, no pun intended, at doing stories about cannibals. My favorite, of course, being the amazing musical by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, aptly named Cannibal, the Musical, which you've heard the little song dingle at the end of every South Park episode. You get the reference to this movie. But that's not important right now. We're talking about cannibalism and toys, and specifically, there's a very interesting example at market right now in the terms of Baby Yoda. All right, so background. Choices. It's all about choices. Every purchase we make is about what choice do we want? Do we want car A, B, or C, and why? What are the advantages of each? In the toy industry, there is, shall we say, I don't want to call it viciousness, but it's more like territoriality. Territoriality? Am I saying that right? You know, where people sort of follow these unwritten rules about which companies get to produce product for which toy aisles. Now, these rules, going back to that Pirates of the Caribbean thing, it's more of a guideline than a rule, if you will. But they're things like the fact that Mattel makes die-cast cars. That's kind of their thing. They're known as the makers of Hot Wheels. And for the most part, Hasbro, as another example, is the makers of board games. Owning Parker Brothers, that definitely gives them a leg up. It doesn't mean that Hasbro can't or doesn't make die-cast cars. They obviously do. But you don't see it as much. You are seeing it more now, but historically. And the same thing with board games. Mattel does have a game and puzzle division. They do Uno, which is one of their most successful. But they don't really tackle the board games like Monopoly or Clue. Now, these traditional unspoken rules of the toy aisle have definitely started to fall apart in the last few years. Another case in point, much like die-cast cars, Mattel has more or less, for the last 40 years, owned the doll. Yes, there's been other fashion dolls out there, but Mattel has been the queen of the aisle. And likewise, on the other side of the store, Hasbro more or less has been king of the action figures. Again, it doesn't mean that Mattel can't make action figures, and they obviously do. And it doesn't mean, likewise, that Hasbro can't make dolls. And in fact, recently they've gotten some major doll license, such as the Disney princesses, that actually switched from being at Mattel to being at Hasbro. And Hasbro now has a blooming doll fashion division, if you will. Another good example of this, and I promise we're going to get to Baby Yoda in a moment, is the Barbie versus Bratz lawsuit. For those of you who know about this, you can always YouTube or Google more information, but essentially there was a dispute between MGA and Mattel over the ownership of Bratz, and Mattel would lose, then MGA would lose, then one would win, then the other would win, and it would just go on and on and on, until really the only person who won was the lawyers. Mattel wound up coming out with their own line to compete with Bratz. There was the Barbie Flavas line, which did okay, but it didn't stick around that much. And Bratz isn't even really at the market much more. Boy, my English is much more better. All right, so why all this background? And why are we talking about consumer choice? Well, the more brands that are out there, the more the consumer has to choose from. And likewise, the more of the same brand that's out there is also more for the consumer to choose from. When there are too many brands out there, well, it creates what's called toy cannibalization. And that's why we're going to talk about our cute little black-eyed, long-eared, green-skinned robed fella here from The Mandalorian that we all just fell in love with. So it's no secret that there is a couple skus for Baby Yoda out at market. And yes, I know he's called the child, but I'm calling him Baby Yoda. And you can pretty much find Baby Yoda in any form you want. You could find him dressed up as Santa Claus, you could find him snuggled in a blanket, you can find him walking around, you can find him eating frogs. You can get him on a t-shirt, you can get him on a pop, you can get him on a hat, you can get him everywhere. It's like a Dr. Seuss book, isn't it? Except I'm not actually rhyming things because I'm not as talented as Theodore was. The point being is that Baby Yoda has become what's called a breakout character, and he is being put and label slapped on everything, and we mean everything, because, the first thing I do when I wake up is wanting to eat Baby Yoda cereal. So essentially, after a series of movies that Disney put out for Star Wars, there hasn't really been a breakout character. They've had, 5 movies and 2 animated series, and the only character that's kind of broken out is BB-8. And his fad didn't last that long. I mean, he was cute, he was original, he was neat, but he didn't really, dominate pop culture. Now along comes The Mandalorian, this TV show on Disney+. And it does wind up having a breakout character because he's cute and girls love him, boys love him, men love him, women love him, everybody loves him. And the response has been a huge merchandise campaign of Baby Yoda in every single possible way, in every form factor. Now compare this to the way things were done in the vintage era of Star Wars back in the 80s. If you wanted Greedo, for example, this was your Greedo. You had pretty much one choice to go to. You had your Kenner action figure, and you called it a day. Wasn't even screen accurate, but gosh darn it, it was Greedo, and you were happy about it. Fast forward to now in what I call the age of the form factor, and you're going to find a character like Greedo available in any way you want him, from plush to Pez. Is this a good thing? That's questionable, and we'll kind of find out in a few years how much the age of the form factor has affected collectability and playability with toys and licensed characters. But for now, living in this age of form factor, you can even get Greedo as a 3 3/4 figure in multiple different ways, with soft goods, with rubber, retro-y. Maybe a better comparison for Baby Yoda would be to actually look at the original Yoda. So when he came out in 1980, he was also held back and was a secret, much like Baby Yoda, because they didn't want him leaking out before the film to spoil the surprise. And again, there was one Yoda action figure. Okay, well, there were 2 if you wanted to count, brown snake and orange snake, and eyes that were painted and eyes that were painted different colors, or the skin tone. But come on, it's the same figure. They were just running changes. Well, and there was also this Yoda puppet that was put out, but that was it. For as far as 1980 goes, Yoda had 2 skus at retail, especially toy skus. I'm sure there were some T-shirts and some other things. The thing with Baby Yoda now is we are in his first year of merchandise, and it is already on clearance. It is already hitting stores like Ollie's and Five and Below. And that's an issue, because when you have a breakout character, the whole idea is to be able to sell that character and to meet demand, not produce over the demand, because then you wind up with situations like this, where Baby Yoda hangs out with Force Awakens and Forces of Destiny merchandise on the clearance aisle. So how do you find balance? How do you figure out how much product to produce without overproducing the product? Well, at the end of the day, it really comes down to limits. And whether those are high limits or low limits, establishing those boundaries, like what the author of Harry Potter did so well. J.K. Rowling said, there are 7 Harry Potter books, that's it, I'm out. And even though there's all this pressure from her talent agent and the studios to produce more Harry Potter books, she's saying no. Well, I mean, unless you count things like the play script, of the sequel, but that's not really a book, that's a play. And, or unless, of course, you count the spin-off books that are supposed to be like Harry's actual books. But it's not like they're going to make a movie out of Harry's school books. Okay, well, I mean, it's not like they're going to make multiple movies out of Harry's school book. All right, I'm not getting anywhere with this one. Let's get back to Baby Yoda here. All right, so we have all this Baby Yoda merchandise out there, and it's already hitting discount retailers and clearance aisles. So does that mean we've overproduced it? We've made too much of it? And it might not be an idea of much as too much of one item as, as Bilbo says, spreading butter over, too much bread, where you can't cover, or you've just, am I mixing up metaphors? The point is, too much can be a problem. Too many choices, too many skus, too much of the same thing is not necessarily a good thing, especially in the toy industry. In the toy industry, I have absolutely found from experience that more is less. Being able to drive people to one specific SKU can actually lead to success. I did this with Masters of the Universe Classics. Very deliberately, we didn't put out other He-Man form factors at the time. We only put out one, because too much is going to lead to what I would call Baby Yoda fatigue, where you're just putting it out everywhere. An answer could be, like we did with Masters of the Universe Classics, you drive everyone to one form factor, to one toy. Maybe not one in the case of Baby Yoda, but limiting it and driving your consumers to one item limits cannibalization and, in the end, grows the brand long term. And that's what the goal should be. Make consumers happy, keep the brand alive. I hope you liked this video. I hope it was helpful. Leave your comments below and give it a like and a subscription, because that tells YouTube to share it with other people. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you at the next video.